A new year does not change your life. A new consciousness does. And as 2026 approaches, heaven is giving you one more chance to choose the words, the thoughts, and the inner state that will shape your next 12 months. If you want the coming year to be different, you cannot enter it with the same vibration that created this one. Think of all the years that began with hope, but slipped into the same patterns. Fear on the first of the month, dread before work, tension in the home, prayers spoken half-heartedly, then forgotten. You told yourself, this year will be better, but your words the next morning rebuilt the old life brick by brick. Let me speak to you plainly. You cannot build a new year with yesterday's decrees. If you enter 2026 speaking fear, rehearsing defeat, expecting disappointment, the year will obey you with painful precision. But if you will listen, truly listen, to what I'm about to reveal, you can alter the entire direction of the next 12 months before they even arrive. Pause for a moment and breathe. Imagine a version of 2026 where money comes to you easily, where your home feels peaceful, where your body feels strengthened, where relationships soften into harmony, where opportunities appear without strain. Imagine waking each morning with expectancy instead of dread. This picture is not fantasy. It is potential, waiting for your word. But here is the danger, and I place it before you with love. If you ignore this message, the next year will not simply repeat the last. It will deepen it. Fear compounds, doubt compounds. Every careless word engraves itself further into your affairs. To ignore truth is to strengthen the very conditions you wish to escape. Now let me take you into a moment you know too well. It is late at night. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the future. A silent heaviness creeps over you. What if nothing changes next year? That thought is not harmless. It is a seed, and if you let it grow, it will design the next 12 months in its own image. But listen to the whisper beneath the fear. Your life can turn if your words turn. You do not need a miracle tomorrow. You need a decree today. Let me share with you a case as old as time. A man once came to me after years of failure at the start of every new year. He made resolutions, promises, plans. Yet by February, everything collapsed into the familiar. I asked him one question. How do you speak when January disappoints you? He confessed, I say things like, here we go again. Nothing ever changes. Exactly. He rebuilt the old year with his own tongue. He began a new practice. Each morning, he spoke a decree of divine order over his affairs. Every day of this year unfolds in perfect ways. My good cannot be delayed. His circumstances, long unchanged, shifted so quickly that he said, it feels as if the year obeyed my words. It had. Now let me speak directly to your spirit. You are standing at the threshold of 2026, and the atmosphere around your life is malleable. Heaven waits for your command. Life is listening. Your subconscious is listening. Even your difficulties are listening. If you speak fear, they will grow. If you speak faith, they will dissolve. If you bless your path, it will open. If you expect good, it rushes toward you. But you must choose intentionally. The old year was built through drifting. The new one must be built through decree. Imagine waking on the first morning of 2026 and saying, this year, everything moves in my favor. I walk in divine order. Nothing can be taken from me that belongs to my path. Say that with conviction, and you will feel the old heaviness break. But if you ignore this, if you drift into the new year without a word of power, you will remain bound to the same cycles, the same anxiety, the same financial strain, the same conflicts, the same emotional exhaustion. Not because you failed, but because you did not command. Let me paint another scene. You are standing in your kitchen one evening, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound. You look at your life, your responsibilities, your past decisions, your unfulfilled hopes, and you whisper, "I want next year to be different." Heaven hears that whisper. But heaven cannot act until your words match your intention. Desire without decree produces nothing. If you truly want 2026 to be different, then hear what I am about to say with the deepest part of your being. Do not carry fear into the new year. Do not carry lack into the new year. Do not carry self-doubt into the new year. Do not carry the memory of failures into the new year. Release them. Surrender them. Speak them out of your experience, because the moment you do, something extraordinary happens. The path ahead lights up, coincidences gather like divine breadcrumbs, your intuition sharpens, and unseen help begins to work on your behalf. This is how you make a new year new. But let me caution you once more, for some ignore the very message that could free them. If you hear these words and walk away unchanged, you will step into 2026 carrying the same burdens, and they will grow heavier. The law is impartial. What you repeat, you reinforce. What you decree, you experience. But if you listen, if you apply even one spiritual law I am about to give you, you will set in motion a year so different from the last that you will not recognize yourself by December. So, as this message continues, listen with the attention of someone who knows their future is being shaped in this very moment. Listen as one who is ready to walk into a year of answered prayer. Listen as one who refuses to repeat the past. Listen as one who is ready for divine order to take charge of 2026. And above all, do not ignore this message. Your next year depends on it. When a year draws to its close, I always feel that humanity stands at the edge of a great threshold, as though one were holding the door to a new room in the house of life, uncertain whether to enter boldly or linger in the hall of old experiences. And I have seen, again and again, that most people carry their old year into the new one, as a traveler drags a heavy trunk filled with garments he no longer wears. The calendar changes, but the consciousness remains the same, and consciousness is the only architect of experience. So as I speak to you now, I speak not of fireworks and festivities, not of resolutions scribbled on scraps of paper, but of the unseen workshop where the next 12 months will be forged, the inner chamber of your own mind. It is there, and there alone, that a new year is truly born. If you would have 2026 be different from all the years that came before it, then you must begin not with outer plans, but with inner decrees. For your word is your wand, and the next year will obey it as faithfully as a well-trained servant. I once said to a student, "You cannot build a new year with yesterday's decrees," and she looked startled, for she had believed her past wishes would carry themselves forward into the future. Yet wishes are like smoke. They vanish unless held in place by the spoken word. The word is the scaffold. The wish is the drapery. The word is the foundation. The hope is the ornament. Without the foundation, the ornament collapses. Most people enter a new year as though they were sleepwalkers crossing a threshold without waking. They bring with them the same fears, the same disappointments, the same habits of speech, and then wonder why the year unfolds in the same old way. They say on the 1st of January, "This year will be different," but on the 2nd, they mutter, "Nothing ever changes for me." And the year, obedient to the stronger decree, becomes a perfect duplicate of all that came before it. A man may move to a new city, find new employment, or surround himself with new acquaintances. But unless he changes the inner blueprint, the mental picture, he carries the old year upon his shoulders like a cloak that refuses to fall. I knew a man who dreaded the arrival of January. He said, "Every year begins with trouble. It is my fate." And so it was, for he affirmed it. He had no watchman at the gate of his mind, and every careless word slipped past him into his affairs. When he came to me after yet another discouraging start to the year, I asked him, "How do you speak when the first difficulty arises?" He said, "I always say, 'Here we go again.'" And there was the whole story. He commanded the year to repeat itself, and the year obeyed. I taught him to declare instead, "This year unfolds in perfect ways. My good cannot be delayed." He began speaking these words with the earnestness of a man who has found a lifeline after drifting at sea. And to his astonishment, the next year unfolded with such grace that he said, "It feels as though the days themselves bowed to my word." Indeed, they had, for the word is law. A year is not a box filled with events. It is an obedient field awaiting seed. A year is not a river that sweeps you along helplessly. It is a well that fills itself according to the cup you hold out. A year is not a mystery. It is a mirror. It reflects exactly the images, the words, the expectations that you impress upon it day after day. If you speak fear, the year will carve channels for that fear to express itself. If you speak faith, the year will smooth its stones before your feet. If you expect disappointment, the year will bow its head and bring you what you asked for. If you expect miracles, the year will rise like a great wave and carry you farther than your own strength could ever have done. There is a strange belief among people that time possesses a will of its own, that a year may arrive filled with ill fortune or good fortune, like a visitor bearing unpredictable gifts. But time is no such visitor. Time is a blank page, and man's word is the pen that writes upon it. When Joshua commanded the sun to stand still, he demonstrated not a miraculous exception to the law, but the law itself. That man is not subject to time. Time is subject to man's consciousness. When Ezekiel prophesied to the dry bones and they rose from the dust, he illustrated the same truth, that conditions obey thought, and when thought is spoken with conviction, it becomes flesh. So do not enter 2026 hoping that something outside yourself will rearrange your life. Rearrange your thought, and life will hasten to follow. Now let us look at the subconscious mind, for it is the silent mason who builds the walls of your year. The subconscious accepts every word you speak, whether idle or intentional, and begins laying the bricks of experience accordingly. If you say, "I fear what this new year will bring," the subconscious begins to erect pillars of fear. If you say, "I expect only good," it opens the floodgates to good. It is like a faithful servant who takes your instructions literally. If you tell it to build a house without windows, it will do so. If you tell it to build a palace open to light, it will do that as well. The tragedy is that most people give their subconscious two sets of instructions. One whispered in hope, the other shouted in fear. They whisper on New Year's Day, "I want peace and abundance," but they shout on January 2nd, "I can't afford this," or "I dread what's coming." And the subconscious, being governed not by desire but by repetition, obeys the shouted decree. That is why repetition of truth is essential. Truth must be hammered into the subconscious like a golden nail. Speak your decrees morning and night until they sink deeply enough to drown out the old, fear-filled patterns. Let me tell you of a woman who came to me after many years of beginning each new year with promises to herself. She would resolve to save money, to find better employment, to improve her health. But within weeks, the resolutions dissolved like mist, and she found herself repeating the same old routine. She said, "Mrs. Shinn, I have tried everything." I replied, "You have tried effort. Now try law." I taught her to say each morning before rising, "Every day of this year unfolds in perfect ways. My good cannot be lost." And I instructed her to speak these words aloud, for the spoken word has a power the silent thought cannot match. She obeyed diligently, and soon she found herself turning away from old habits with surprising ease. Unexpected opportunities came her way. People treated her differently, as though they sensed a new strength in her. Her year changed because she changed, and the year merely reflected her transformation. Do not underestimate the effect your new consciousness will have on those around you. When you begin to speak truth with authority, when you cease repeating the old fear story, when your tone becomes settled and your eyes steady, others will feel the change even before you do. They may not know what has shifted, but they will respond to it. You will find strangers treating you with unusual respect, friends seeking your counsel, and employers trusting you with greater responsibility. People are drawn to order, and when divine order enters your consciousness, it radiates outward through your demeanor, your posture, your speech, even your footsteps. A person who is aligned with divine law walks with an invisible entourage, and others sense it. Many years ago, I taught a young man who always began his years with enthusiasm, but quickly descended into discouragement. He believed himself unlucky, though in truth, he was simply undisciplined in his speech. On January 1st, he would declare, "This will be my best year yet," but by January 10th, he would mutter, "Nothing ever goes right for me." His decrees canceled each other like two men pulling a rope in opposite directions. I told him, "Neutral words create a neutral year. Conflicting words create confusion." I gave him one simple decree: "I expect the unexpected. My good now comes to pass." I told him to speak it at the door of each new day. He did so, though half-heartedly at first. But as the weeks passed, he found himself awakening with a sense of anticipation. And when his attitude shifted, doors that had long been closed began to swing open. Opportunities flowed to him like water finding its level. People said, "You seem different," and indeed he was, for he had placed a new sentinel at the gate of his mind. I want you to understand something essential. A new year is not a guarantee. It is a responsibility. It is a blank check handed to you by the infinite, and you must write upon it with wisdom. Do not scribble old fears upon it. Do not stain it with complaints. Do not let it sit unsigned until life fills it with random experiences. Declare what the year shall hold. Write it upon the ethers with your voice. Speak it into the silent substance of the universe. This year brings only what blesses me. Nothing can be taken from me that belongs to my path. My good is secure, and it hastens toward me. When you speak words such as these, you engrave a pattern upon the year. You give the months their shape. You determine how the days will treat you. And the more often you speak them, the stronger the pattern becomes. For repetition is the sculptor of consciousness. Do not be tempted to say, "I have spoken affirmations before, and nothing happened." If nothing happened, it was because you spoke with doubt, or spoke once and then contradicted your word with fear. The law works swiftly when man works steadily. Hammer the truth into your subconscious until it becomes the only voice it can hear. Speak not in a whisper, but in authority. Say boldly, "I now prepare for a year of triumph," and the invisible forces begin to stir. A year is not a mountain to be climbed. It is a garden to be cultivated, and you are the gardener. The seeds you plant in December and January will sprout in March and April. If you plant fear, fear will bloom. If you plant faith, faith will bear fruit. The law cannot be fooled. It brings forth only what is sown. So sow deliberately, sow with joy, sow with the certainty that every word is a seed containing the blueprint of your good. If you could see the unseen activity that begins the moment you speak a decree, you would never waste a single word again. Angels of intuition begin arranging divine appointments. The soil of consciousness shifts to support your new planting. The old patterns crack and fall away like dried clay. The year bends around your word like a reed bending to the wind. And now, having laid the foundation of your new year, we must turn to the next great task. Releasing the ghosts of past years, the old fears, the disappointments, the failures that would otherwise trail you like shadows across the threshold of 2026. For a new room cannot be entered while dragging the furniture of the old one. When you are ready, we shall step into that cleansing. The most dangerous thing a person can carry into a new year is not debt, nor sickness, nor loneliness, nor even the memory of failure. The most dangerous thing is an unexamined picture hidden in the depths of the subconscious. An image of how life has always been, silently insisting it must remain so. These old pictures are like ghosts from former years. They wander into the new year uninvited, shaping it in the likeness of yesterday, unless they are deliberately dismissed by the spoken word. And so I say to you now, with utmost seriousness, before you step into 2026, you must release the hauntings of 2025 and all the years before it. Otherwise, you will walk through a new door wearing the same old garments. People often believe they suffer from bad luck, not knowing they are simply living out the echoes of yesterday's mental films. They carry in their subconscious a picture of themselves as the one who is always anxious about bills, or always overlooked at work, or always wounded in relationships, or always waiting for the other shoe to drop. And life, ever obedient, projects these inner films upon the screen of experience. Thus a year becomes not a fresh creation, but a sequel. Let me give you a picture. A woman came to me many years ago, certain she was cursed to lose money every March. She said, "Mrs. Shinn, I do not mean to be superstitious, but every March something happens. A job ends, a bill arrives unexpectedly, or something breaks in the house. It has happened for years." I listened carefully, and then I asked her, "What do you expect when March approaches?" She confessed, "I always think, oh no, here comes March." There it was, the ghost of her past years stepping into the new one through the doorway of expectancy. I taught her to say, "There is no loss in divine mind. Therefore, I cannot lose anything that belongs to me. I cast this burden on the Christ within, and I go free." She repeated it with devotion. That March arrived, and instead of loss, she received a refund she had not expected. She came to me astonished, saying, "It is as though March bowed to my decree," and so it had. This is the boomerang law. Every thought and every word returns to the one who sends it out. If you speak fear of repeating the past returns. If you speak freedom, the past dissolves. You cannot whisper, "I dread what's coming," and expect the year to bring joy. You cannot say in a moment of frustration, "Nothing ever works out for me," and then wonder why the months seem to conspire against you. These are not harmless remarks. They are commands. The subconscious hears them and says, "Very well, we shall arrange it so." That is why the scriptures proclaim, "Thou art snared with the words of thy mouth." It is not judgment, it is law. Let me tell you of another woman whose life transformed the moment she dismissed the ghosts of old years. She had been disappointed in love, in work, and in friendship, and she carried within her the silent conviction that nothing new could come that was not tinged with sorrow. When she entered a new year, she did so cautiously, as though expecting another blow. I told her, "You are dragging the past behind you like a heavy trunk. Set it down and walk free." I gave her the decree. Every false picture is erased. My past is powerless to command my future. At first, she said it timidly, for the old images were strong. But I told her, the subconscious responds not to timidity, but to persistence. She repeated the decree morning and night, until one day, she felt something loosen within her, like a knotted rope beginning to unwind. Soon, blessings that had long been blocked flowed toward her. She met new people, found new work, and said, "It feels as though my life was waiting for me to step aside." Indeed, life is always waiting for man to release the past so the new may enter. You may wonder how others will perceive this inner cleansing. I tell you plainly, when a person releases the ghosts of past years, it is visible. The eyes brighten, the face softens, the shoulders lift. People look at them and think, "You seem lighter," though perhaps they cannot name the reason. Employers sense a new confidence. Friends perceive steadiness where there was once tension. Even strangers respond with unusual kindness. For nothing weighs upon a man more heavily than unhealed memories, and nothing frees him more completely than their release. Do not think you can carry both fear and faith into the new year. The subconscious will side with whichever you repeat. If every morning you say, "I dread the future," and in the evening you say, "But I hope things improve," the morning decree will win, for fear repeats itself more loudly than hope. But if every morning you say, "My past is finished," "My good is here," and if you persist in this statement, your subconscious will yield, and the old pictures will crumble like walls of Jericho before the trumpet's blast. Let me show you another angle of this truth. I once counseled a man who was haunted by the memory of an old financial loss. Every time he began to prosper, the memory rose like a specter and whispered, "It will happen again." And faithful to his mental film, the loss would indeed repeat itself. I said to him, "You are rehearsing your failures instead of rehearsing your victories." I taught him the decree. What was lost returns to me multiplied. My good cannot be taken from me. He practiced it with zeal. In time, an opportunity appeared that not only restored what he had lost, but exceeded it many times. He said to me, "It was as though a door that had long been bolted suddenly opened." And indeed, his own thoughts had been the bolt. When you release the old pictures, you create space for intuition to enter. The subconscious, once cluttered with fear films, becomes clear and ready for divine ideas. Intuition is the voice of spirit, and it speaks most clearly in a cleared mind. It is like a gentle wind that cannot pass through a forest of tangled branches, but flows freely across an open field. So, if you desire clear guidance in 2026, you must first clear away the old mental debris. Here are the affirmations that cleanse the subconscious most effectively. I cast this burden on the Christ within, and I go free. Every false picture is erased. There is no loss in divine mind. My past has no power over my present or my future. Say them not once, but repeatedly. Speak them while walking, while preparing your meals, while waiting in line, while lying awake at night. Persistence chisels new grooves in the subconscious until the past releases its hold and the path ahead shines like a newly polished mirror. You may ask, how long must I repeat these affirmations? I answer, until you feel the inner click. There comes a moment when the words sink from the surface mind into the depths of the subconscious, and you feel as though a great stone has rolled away. That moment is the resurrection of your consciousness. After that, you will find yourself thinking differently without effort, expecting differently without strain, and speaking differently without discipline. The new consciousness will carry you like a strong tide. Now that the ghosts of old years have been dismissed and the subconscious has been cleared for new planting, we move naturally to the next great law, intuition, God's direct instruction to man. For no year can unfold in perfect ways unless man learns to hear and obey the quiet voice that reveals his next step. When the past has been released and the subconscious stands cleared like a swept threshold, intuition, long muffled beneath the clamor of old fears, begins to speak again. And its voice, once faint as a distant bell, grows steady and sure. Intuition is God's direction for man, the divine whisper that reveals the next step before the reasoning mind has time to question. If you desire 2026 to unfold in perfect ways, you must learn to lean upon this inner guidance, for intuition is the lamp carried by the traveler through unfamiliar country. It does not illuminate the entire road at once, only the next sure step. But that is all that is ever required. I have observed that those who feel most lost at the beginning of a year are not lacking opportunity, but lacking the willingness to heed the intuitive leading that glimmers within them. They say, "I do not know what to do." Yet beneath that very statement lies a quiet impulse, a thought like a feather brushing the mind. Write this letter. Make that call. Walk down this street. Rest today. Speak kindly. Release that object. Try this path. But they dismiss these impressions as insignificant or irrational, unaware that great doors often swing on the smallest hinges. Let me give you a case. A man came to me after years of beginning each new year in confusion about his direction. He complained that he could not find his place in life. I asked him, "Have you ever obeyed your intuition?" He replied, "Not often. It never seems practical." I smiled, for intuition frequently defies the limited logic of man. I instructed him, "Each morning, before you rise, say, 'Infinite Spirit, reveal to me the next step. Let the divine idea come to pass.' Then go about your day with expectancy." He followed this practice. On the third morning, as he prepared for work, he felt impressed to take a different route, though it seemed entirely unnecessary. He obeyed the impulse without argument. On that route, he passed a small shop that had posted a sign seeking someone with a skill he possessed but had long neglected. Something stirred in him, an old talent awakening. He applied, and through a series of seemingly minor events, this led him into a new line of work that brought him prosperity, joy, and a sense of rightness he had not felt in years. "It was the smallest nudge," he said, "yet it changed the entire direction of my life. And so it is. Intuition is seldom dramatic. It is consistent." You must understand that intuition is God's method of arranging the perfect unfolding of your year. It is the golden thread in the tapestry, leading you stitch by stitch into the divine design of your life. Reason calculates, intuition reveals. Reason concludes, intuition knows. Reason fears risks. Intuition sees the path already prepared. If you insist on making every decision by reason alone, you will miss the divine shortcuts that intuition offers, and your year will be a laborious climb rather than a smooth ascent. Consider the wise men of Scripture. They did not reason their way to the Christ child. They followed a star, symbol of intuition. They obeyed the quiet guidance of light in the dark. so must you follow the star within, especially at the dawn of a new year. Another student once confessed to me that she often felt inner leadings, but feared they would lead her astray. I answered, "Intuition never leads to harm. If a thought brings peace, quiet assurance, or a sense of rightness, it is of God. If it brings fear or haste, set it aside. It is not intuition." She began practicing this discernment. Soon she found her days unfolding with remarkable ease. Errands completed at the perfect hour, meetings occurring at precisely the right moment, and opportunities arriving with the rhythm of divine timing. She said, "I feel as though I walk in a lighted way." And so she did. When a person begins to heed intuition, others notice the change outwardly. His movements become more deliberate, his speech becomes calmer, his decisions appear strangely wise. Employers sense that he carries good judgment, though they may not understand that he is guided by a wisdom beyond the intellect. Friends remark upon his poise. Even strangers respond to the atmosphere of certainty that surrounds him. A guided person is a magnet for harmony. Let me tell you of a young woman I taught. She worked in a bustling office, yet longed for more meaningful work. For years, she forced herself into tasks that did not suit her nature. I taught her to listen for intuition. One morning, she felt impelled to learn a skill she had long admired but never pursued. It seemed unrelated to her job, yet she obeyed. Within months, that skill opened a path into a new role, one that she later said felt like coming home. Intuition had prepared the way long before she understood it. The divine plan is always ahead of man. Intuition merely invites him to keep pace with it. Perhaps you say, "I have ignored intuition for so long that I fear I can no longer hear it." Nonsense. Intuition is the voice of spirit, and spirit does not abandon its children. It speaks continually. Only your attention has wandered. Begin today with this decree. Infinite Spirit, open the way. Reveal to me the next step. I walk in a lighted way. Repeat it until you feel a softening within yourself, as though a window has been unlatched. Then go about your day calmly, without straining to hear something. Intuition arrives in its own manner, quietly, naturally, like a feather landing on your hand. When the impression comes, act upon it before fear has time to interfere. Let me illustrate this with another case. A woman wished for a better living arrangement, but saw no means to improve her situation. For years, she had ignored inner nudges to visit a certain neighborhood, thinking it too expensive. But after practicing intuitive listening, she felt one morning that she must walk there. She obeyed without argument. As she strolled down a quiet street, she saw a small sign in a window, an apartment available. She inquired, and to her amazement, the rent was within her reach. The apartment was perfect for her needs, and its atmosphere filled her with peace. She said, "I realize now that intuition had been calling me for years." When she obeyed, the divine plan rushed to meet her. Intuition is always ahead of you. It sees the next step long before you reach it. When you align with it, the new year becomes a dance rather than a struggle. You move from coincidence to coincidence, each one carrying you forward effortlessly. You avoid pitfalls that once trapped you. You arrive at perfect timing that seems lucky to the untrained eye. But it is not luck, it is law. The new year is like a great river, and intuition is the current that carries the one who yields to its movement. If you resist, you exhaust yourself paddling against the flow. If you obey, you glide. This is the year when intuition must become your compass. Do not attempt to chart the entire course of 2026 with human planning. Human plans may crumble, but divine guidance cannot fail. Speak boldly each morning. I am divinely guided. I follow the magic path of intuition. I am always in my right place, doing the right thing, at the right time. Keep speaking it until the subconscious hears it as truth. Then notice how your days begin to unfold in rhythm, how delays dissolve, how obstacles part before you, how opportunities shimmer at the edge of your awareness before stepping fully into view. And now that intuition has been awakened and the inner ear trained to hear wisdom, we move naturally to the next great cornerstone of your 2026, stepping into your divine design, your right place, your perfect self-expression, your appointed work and destiny, prepared long before you asked for it. Every soul is born with a divine design, a perfect pattern woven by infinite intelligence before time began. It is not a vague destiny nor a distant dream, but a living blueprint stamped upon the heart of man, a place where he belongs, a work he is fitted to do, a path that leads straight into his highest joy and greatest usefulness. This pattern cannot be stolen, cannot be blocked, cannot be altered except by man's own fear or unbelief. And the moment he aligns himself with spiritual law, the divine design rises before him like a map illuminated by torchlight. So many people enter a new year feeling out of place. They say, "I do not know where I belong," or "I feel that I am meant for more." Yet they remain trapped by the belief that their present circumstances must determine their future. But circumstances are not masters. They are servants. They shift and rearrange themselves the moment a man speaks the word that calls forth his rightful position. The mistake people make is to assume that right work is found by struggle, ambition, or planning. But right work is not found. It is revealed. It appears when the inner consciousness becomes equal to it. I once counseled a woman who felt suffocated in her occupation. She longed for a work more harmonious with her nature, but believed she lacked the qualifications for anything else. She said, "Mrs. Shinn, I feel misplaced, as though I am living a role not written for me." I replied, "You are speaking the truth. You are misplaced, but only because your consciousness has not yet embraced your divine design. Begin by declaring, 'Let the divine design of my life now come to pass.' Say it morning and night. Say it until you feel that you are calling home something long awaited." She obeyed. Within a short time, small signs appeared. People began mentioning opportunities she had never considered. She felt compelled to tidy her affairs, to clear her home of burdensome objects, to prepare herself inwardly. Then one day, an acquaintance offered her a position perfectly aligned with her talents, so perfectly that she said, "It fits like a garment tailored to me." She stepped into her right place, and her whole life blossomed. She said, "It feels as though I have stopped trying to breathe underwater and finally come to the surface." That is the sensation of divine design. Your right place always feels like air after suffocation. It feels inevitable. It feels prepared. It feels as though it had been waiting for you, quietly, patiently, until you grew ready to receive it. When man enters his right place, he becomes a conduit for divine ideas. His work becomes joyful rather than laborious. His compensation increases naturally, without strain, and those around him perceive a new assurance as though he has finally stepped into his true stature. But man cannot enter his right place while clinging to the wrong one out of fear. He must be willing to release the old mental picture. He must stop rehearsing failure, stop calling himself unqualified, stop expecting disappointment. These expectations are like locked doors in the subconscious, blocking the entrance to divine design. The moment he speaks the word of release, the doors swing open. Let me tell you of a man who longed for advancement but believed himself limited by education and opportunity. He said, "Others rise, but I remain the same." I taught him to say instead, I have a wonderful work in a wonderful way, and I give wonderful service for wonderful pay. At first, he repeated the words mechanically, not believing them. But as he persisted, they began to reshape his consciousness. His posture straightened, his tone of voice deepened, his eyes took on a steadiness he had not possessed before. His employer noticed. Soon, he was entrusted with new responsibilities, and eventually he stepped into a position he had once considered impossible. He said, "It is as though the work found me." And so it had, for right work always seeks the one who is right inwardly. Others will see your transformation before you fully recognize it yourself. They will note the calm in your manner, the decisiveness in your speech, the poise in your actions. They may say, "You seem different," or "You have changed." What they perceive is the divine design beginning to shine through the outer personality. Your very presence announces that you are aligned with purpose. People are instinctively drawn to someone who walks in their right place, for such a person radiates harmony. Employers trust them. Friends admire them. Family members lean on them. Even strangers sense the difference. Now, there is a curious truth about divine design. Man often receives glimpses of it long before it appears. He feels drawn to certain activities, moved by certain ideas, or fascinated by certain possibilities. These are not accidents. These are signposts placed by infinite intelligence, urging him forward. When a person says, "I have always wanted to do that," or "I feel most alive when I do this," he is touching the edge of his divine pattern. These desires are not whims, they are prophecies. A woman once told me she felt foolish for wanting to study a skill that seemed unrelated to her work. It would serve no purpose, she said. But intuition urged her, and so she obeyed. That very skill became the means through which she entered her right place months later. So often the divine design is revealed through what seems at first insignificant. A talent one has ignored, a hobby one has dismissed, a dream one has tucked away. These small threads often lead to the full tapestry. Sometimes divine design leads man out of a place altogether. Sometimes it transforms the place he is in. A clerk may become a manager, an assistant may become a creator, a laborer may become an inventor, a homemaker may become a guide to many. The path is not always dramatic. It may unfold quietly, like dawn breaking across the sky. But one thing is sure, when man is in his right place, he knows it by the peace that fills him. Let me speak to you directly now. 2026 may be the year when your divine design fully emerges. It may be the year when you stop forcing yourself into the shape of someone else's expectation and finally grow into the stature that belongs to you. But this will not happen by chance. It will happen because you decree it. Speak these words. Let the divine design of my life now come to pass. Say it until you feel a stirring in your spirit. Say it until you sense that something is aligning on your behalf. Say it until intuition begins pointing out the next steps. If you do this faithfully, 2026 will not be a wandering year. It will be a year of right place, right work, right direction. A year where the path ahead feels prepared and each step feels guided. A year in which you live not by struggle, but by revelation. Now, having anchored your consciousness in divine design, we must turn to a law that enforces and protects that design. The law of the word, the boomerang law, the watchman at the gate. For no design can stand if man's words contradict it. When you are ready, we shall go forward into that teaching. There is no law more swiftly obeyed in the universe than the law of the spoken word. It is as ancient as creation itself, for the first chapter of Scripture declares, and God said, and it was so. That pattern has never changed. Man, made in the image of God, speaks his world into being. His word goes forth, gathers substance, and returns to him clothed in events. It may return gently as circumstance, or thunderously as crisis, but return it will, for the spoken word is never idle. It is a messenger that never fails to deliver what it carries. If you desire 2026 to be unlike any year that came before it, you must place a watchman at the gate of your lips. For to speak carelessly is to sow weeds in the field of your own future. Many imagine their difficulties arise from fate, chance, or other people, but more often they arise from their own tongues. A man says, "I never get ahead," and behold, the year arranges itself to prove him right. A woman mutters, "Something always goes wrong," and her days bow to fulfill her prophecy. A person sighs, "Another year, another disappointment," and disappointment becomes their obedient servant. I once counseled a young man who complained bitterly that everything he touched failed. He said, "Mrs. Shinn, I must be unlucky." I replied, "Let us examine your words." He confessed that every time he attempted something new, he would mutter, "Here comes another failure." The law cannot be mocked. It must bring back what is spoken. I told him, "Cancel that decree at once. Speak instead, 'Everything I do prospers, for God works through me.'" He obeyed reluctantly, for he had rehearsed failure so long that success seemed unnatural. But he persisted. Soon, he found doors opening that had remained closed for years. He said, "It feels as though life has stopped, resisting me." I answered, "No, you stopped resisting life with your words." Another case comes to mind, one of my favorites for illustrating how a single phrase can shift the entire atmosphere of a person's life. A woman sold apples on a busy street corner. She scowled so fiercely at passers-by that few dared approach. She blamed her poor sales on the neighborhood, the weather, even the price of apples. One day, I said to her, "Madam, your face speaks lack, and the world takes you at your expression. Try blessing your customers instead." She laughed at first, thinking I teased her, but desperation makes one willing. She began saying inwardly, "I attract only good," and greeted people with warmth. In a matter of days, her sales doubled. She exclaimed, "It is as though the street changed," but the street had not changed. Her vibration had changed. Others saw her differently because she had begun speaking differently, first inwardly, then outwardly. You may not stand on a street corner selling apples, but you are selling something every day. Your presence, your energy, your attitude, your expectations. Others pick up on your inner decrees long before you speak them aloud. That is why a person who guards their speech exudes authority. Their words carry weight. They become someone whose suggestions matter, whose tone influences a room, whose presence calms unsettled minds. This is not charisma. It is mastery of the word. Let me tell you of a man who joked so often about poverty that his friends laughed, thinking him clever. He would say, "If anything good ever happens to me, I'll faint dead away," or "Money slips through my fingers," or "I was born unlucky." His subconscious memorized these statements as instructions. When he came to me in distress after a particularly difficult year, I said, "You have entertained misfortune at your table with your own tongue." I taught him to reverse every negative decree he had ever spoken. When he felt tempted to say, "I never win," he instead declared, "Every door opens for me." When he wanted to say, "I fear the worst," he declared, "I expect the best." He persisted, though at first it felt awkward. But the year that followed was the best he had ever known. He said, It seems as though life began listening to me. I replied, "Life always listened. You simply changed your orders." This brings me to an essential teaching. Every word is a boomerang. It flies outward and returns to the speaker. Kind words return as harmony. Grateful words return as blessings. Fearful words return as difficulties. Confident words return as opportunities. To speak is to cast the die. That is why you must become the guardian of your own mouth. Do not permit it to utter anything you do not wish to see grow in the garden of your year. And what of the phrases people speak so casually? "I can't afford that." "I'm tired of everything." "People take advantage of me." "Something always goes wrong." These are more damaging than curses, for curses at least reveal themselves. Casual phrases slip into the subconscious unnoticed and begin building experiences brick by brick. I once counseled a woman who had spent years declaring, "I'm so unlucky with money." She said it lightly, as though commenting on the weather, yet her finances faithfully reflected her decree. I told her, "You are speaking a spell over your own prosperity." I instructed her to say daily, "Money comes to me in perfect and expected ways. My purse is always full." She did so with determination, and before long, unexpected income flowed to her from several directions. She said, "I feel as though the universe was waiting for me to stop contradicting it," and that is exactly what had happened. You must also place a watchman at the gate of the subconscious to guard against the words of others. Well-meaning friends may say, "The new year will be hard," or "Times are difficult," or "Don't expect too much." Do not accept these decrees. Reject them quietly by saying inwardly, "Only divine truth enters my consciousness. I expect the unexpected. My good now comes to pass." You do not need to rebuke others aloud. It is enough to cancel their words with your inner decree. Here are the affirmations that shape a year with power. I speak only the word of victory. I expect only good, and only good comes to me. Every door opens for me under grace and in perfect ways. My word dissolves every obstacle. Speak these with authority as though commanding the very elements, because in truth, you are. Your spoken word sets 2026 in motion long before the year arrives upon your calendar. Let us turn now to how others will perceive this discipline of speech. People are drawn to those whose words carry conviction. They recognize such a person as steady, trustworthy, and calm. An employer sees them as capable of leadership. A friend seeks their counsel. Even adversaries hesitate to oppose them, for they sense an invisible strength. When you begin controlling your speech, you control your vibration. And when you control your vibration, you control the quality of your year. Your new year will not be built by effort, but by decree. Each morning of 2026 will rise obediently to meet the tone you set with your words. If you say, "Today, everything moves in my favor," the day aligns itself accordingly. If you say, "I walk in divine order," your steps are guided. If you say, "I expect miracles," the year will present them with startling frequency. Now, with the law of the word firmly established, we must address the spiritual foundation upon which prosperity rests. The law of supply, the magic purse of the spirit, and the unfolding of unexpected channels. For what is the use of right direction and right speech if man still fears lack? When you are ready, we shall enter that realm of overflowing good. When man understands that supply is spiritual and not material, he steps into the river of abundance that has been flowing beside him all his life, though he may not have noticed its presence. Most people imagine that money comes from wages, from effort, from circumstances, from the generosity of others, or from the economy of the world. But money, like health, joy, and peace, is but an outer sign of an inner state. It is the shadow of consciousness. When the consciousness is filled with fear, the shadow is scarcity. When consciousness is filled with faith and expectancy, the shadow is abundance. Thus, every man walks with his own supply following him faithfully, just as a shadow follows the body that casts it. There is a law behind prosperity, and it is as immutable as the law of mathematics. Man receives from life what he expects from God. Not what he hopes, not what he wishes, not what he half believes on good days, but what he expects with conviction. The person who expects lack will find lack pursuing him with the persistence of a hound. But the person who expects good, calmly, quietly, steadily, will find that the universe hastens to fulfill his expectation with astonishing precision. Consider the magic purse of the spirit, which I have taught many times. It is not a physical purse, but a mental one, a pattern of consciousness that cannot be depleted. When man imagines his purse as full, when he blesses the money within it, when he declares that it overflows with supply, he aligns with the spiritual truth of infinite provision. I once taught a woman who carried with her a small purse that always felt light. She feared opening it, for she dreaded the emptiness she expected to see. I instructed her, "Bless your purse. Say, 'My purse is always full. It can never be depleted.'" She obeyed faithfully. Each morning she held her purse in both hands and blessed it. Each evening she thanked it for the good it held. At first nothing seemed to change, but inwardly everything was changing. Soon money began coming to her from unexpected quarters, a forgotten refund, a small gift, a new avenue of work. She said, "It is as though my purse awakened." But it was her consciousness that awakened, and the purse merely reflected it. Another student had lived for years under the shadow of financial fear. He watched every penny as a sentinel watches the horizon for enemies. He calculated anxiously, withheld joyfully giving, and dreaded every expense. I told him, "You are treating money as your master instead of your servant." I taught him to say, "God is my immediate and endless supply. Money comes to me in perfect ways." He repeated it until the inner tension gave way. Soon his income increased through channels he never imagined. His employer, who had long overlooked him, suddenly perceived his value. The man said, "I feel as though the world has stopped closing its doors." But the world had not changed. His inner door had opened. And here is a truth that often surprises people. Others respond differently to the man who carries a prosperous consciousness. They sense his confidence. They trust his judgment. They admire his calm. They feel uplifted in his presence. Prosperity is not merely a flow of money. It is an atmosphere. When man believes himself to be a channel of abundance, he walks differently, speaks differently, even breathes differently. He becomes like a well-watered garden in a dry land. Others sense the nourishment. Let me tell you of a woman who feared paying her bills. Each envelope that arrived made her shrink inwardly. I taught her to bless her bills. "Every bill you pay," I said, "returns to you multiplied, for you have blessed it." She thought the idea absurd, but obeyed. When a bill arrived, she said, "I bless this bill, for it represents good received. Its payment returns to me multiplied under grace." Within months, her fear of bills vanished, and at the same time, her finances improved. She said, "I feel as though I live under a new sky." Her attitude changed her atmosphere, and her atmosphere changed her year. Another student began spending money under inspiration rather than fear. She had always resisted spending anything, even on necessities, because she feared lack. But I taught her that inspired spending opens channels as surely as giving does. I said, "If a purchase brings dread, it is fear-led. If it brings peace, it is inspired." She practiced this distinction and discovered that inspired spending led her to opportunities, connections, and avenues of income she could never have engineered by calculation. She said, "It is as though the money I spend blesses me on its journey and then returns with companions." Now understand this. Supply is a river that moves toward man the moment he opens the gate of expectation. He does not create supply, he allows it. He does not force abundance, he receives it. When man stops saying, "How shall I ever prosper?" and begins saying, "Every day new channels of prosperity open for me," the universe begins arranging itself accordingly. It orders the right people, the right opportunities, the right ideas, the right conversations, even the right delays. All things conspire for the good of the one who expects good. There is a story in Scripture of the widow whose oil continued to pour so long as she provided vessels. When the vessels ceased, the oil ceased. This illustrates the law of prosperity. God fills what man prepares. If you prepare small expectation, you receive small supply. If you prepare abundant expectation, you receive abundant supply. The oil of spirit never stops flowing. Only man's capacity to receive it fluctuates. And so I say to you now, as we stand at the threshold of 2026, open your vessels. Prepare for abundance. Do not speak of what you lack. Speak of what is on its way. Do not say, "I do not see the supply," for the supply moves invisibly until the moment of appearance. Say instead, "My supply is at hand. It appears in perfect time and perfect ways." As you practice this consciousness, others will behold a change in you. They may not know its cause, but they will feel its effects. They will sense that you are grounded, confident, expectant. They will perceive that you live not in reaction to circumstances, but in partnership with divine law. They will trust you, seek your counsel, admire your calm, and respond to your energy with cooperation. For prosperity is not only money, it is harmony, opportunity, respect, influence, and joy. True prosperity is the capacity to walk through life knowing that all your needs are met before you require them, that every difficulty dissolves before you reach it, that every desire is fulfilled before it becomes a burden. And now, having awakened the consciousness of supply, we must cross the final bridge into the full unveiling of your 2026, the promised land of your year, the place where these laws converge into demonstration. When you are ready, we shall walk there together. When a man has aligned his word, cleansed his past, obeyed intuition, stepped into the stream of divine supply, and opened himself to his rightful place, he stands upon the threshold of something wonderful, a new atmosphere, a new self, a new year that rises to meet him as the dawn rises to greet the mountaintops. This is the threshold of the promised land of 2026, a spiritual landscape where the old patterns no longer rule, where former fears no longer dictate, where delays dissolve, and where man walks under grace and in perfect ways. The promised land is not far away, nor is it gained by force. It is entered by consciousness. And as your consciousness lifts, you enter it naturally, as easily as stepping from one room into another. Let us imagine now that you stand at the boundary between 2025 and 2026. Behind you lies a field of withered stalks, old disappointments, old fears, old failures, old words spoken without thought. Before you stretches a great plain bathed in golden light. This plain represents the year ahead, obedient and receptive. But the doorway between the 2 years is narrow, and you cannot carry your former self through it. You must enter stripped of fear, clothed in faith, guided by intuition, and crowned with expectancy. Only then will the land blossom under your feet. I have often said that no man can enter his promised land while murmuring. The Israelites wandered for 40 years because they complained at every difficulty. They had been freed outwardly, but remained captive inwardly. Their consciousness lagged behind their circumstances. Yet the moment they aligned their thought with the divine instruction, "Go forward," the walls of Jericho fell of their own accord. So it is with you. If you enter 2026 with the murmur of, "What if nothing changes?" or "What if I fail again?" you will circle the same wilderness. But if you declare, with the quiet authority of one who knows the law, "I enter my promised land under grace and in perfect ways," then the walls of lack and delay crumble from before you as though struck by trumpets. Let me tell you of a student whose entire life shifted the year she entered this new consciousness. For many years, she repeated the same cycle. Enthusiasm in January, discouragement in February, resignation in March, and by April, she had accepted whatever conditions surrounded her. She lived as though the year commanded her rather than the other way around. When she found my teachings, she practiced them with devotion. On the last night of the year, she stood quietly and said, "I release every burden of 2025. I cast the old year on the Christ within, and I walk free." Then she declared, "2026 unfolds in perfect ways. My path is prepared." She told me later that when she spoke those words, she felt a great weight lift, as though something invisible had snapped from her shoulders. Within the first month of the year, she found herself guided to an entirely different opportunity, one she had long considered impossible. People who had ignored her suddenly took notice. Doors that had refused to budge swung open. Ideas that had once felt beyond her grasp came with ease. She said, "It is not that the world changed, but that I changed, and the world merely rearranged itself to match my new consciousness." And that is exactly how the law works. Your promised land of 2026 is not a single blessing, but an atmosphere, a mantle of divine order that surrounds your days. When you enter it, you begin to feel a quiet certainty in your bones, a confidence not born of ego, but of inner knowing. You expect right timing. You expect right connections. You expect solutions even before the problem appears. You expect provision before the need arises. You expect joy before the circumstance gives cause. And because you expect these things, they hasten toward you. This expectation is not wishful thinking. It is spiritual magnetism. Let me paint another picture for you. A man once came to me weary with the repetition of years. Each January, he said, "Perhaps this year will finally break the curse." I told him, "There is no curse except the one you pronounce. Speak this. My 2026 is governed by divine law. Nothing can obstruct my good." He repeated it faithfully. Others around him said, "You seem steadier. You look stronger. Your eyes are clear." And indeed, something had shifted. When the first difficulty of the year arose, he did not sigh and say, "Here we go again." He said, "This too comes with gifts," and the problem dissolved within days. By midsummer, he wrote to me saying, "I feel as though the year obeys me." And I answered, "It does." Others will perceive your promised land consciousness even before you fully sense it yourself. They will see a person who walks without the old tension, whose posture is upright, whose voice carries authority. They will sense that you are guided by something beyond intellect. They will trust you, admire you, and offer you opportunities that once seemed reserved for others. You will notice that conversations flow more smoothly, that circumstances coincide in uncanny ways, that delays dissolve, that the right people arrive without effort. These are the signs that you have stepped into your year of demonstration. You may be wondering, how shall I hold this consciousness? How do I make sure 2026 does not slip into old patterns? The answer is simple. Continue the daily practice of the Word. The Word is your anchor, your compass, your shield. When you speak truth consistently, the subconscious accepts it and begins to uphold it as law. Say each morning, "The way is prepared. What is mine comes swiftly and surely. My year unfolds in perfect order." Say it even if you do not feel it. Feeling will follow the decree as surely as shadows follow the body. Say it with quiet authority, as though speaking to an obedient servant. For life is your servant when you speak from the Christ consciousness. Let me offer you a final case to seal your faith. A man burdened by years of misfortune came to me on the eve of a new year. He said, "Mrs. Shinn, I fear the year ahead." I replied, "Fear is false prophecy. Speak instead, I expect the unexpected. My good now comes to pass." He practiced it with devotion. Early in the year, an opportunity appeared that seemed impossible, a role he had once dreamed of but never pursued. He accepted it, guided by intuition, and it changed the course of his life. At the year's end, he said, "I scarcely recognize myself." And that is the hallmark of the promised land. You outgrow the former version of yourself so thoroughly that the old self feels like a stranger. And now, as you stand ready to step into 2026, I give you the decree that opens the gate of your promised land. The walls of lack and delay now crumble away, and I enter my promised land under grace and in perfect ways. Speak it softly. Speak it firmly. Speak it until it vibrates in your bones. And when you are ready, we shall seal this entire teaching with one final unfolding, a benediction of identity, atmosphere, and victory.